Good afternoon, everybody. It is Sunday, let me get this right, 26th of November. Spot on. Welcome to my little corner of the Tinterweb. I hope you've all had a very enjoyable week, and especially my American viewers. I did forget to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving on my previous episode, but I hope you all had a lovely time with your families. I've had quite an interesting week, and I'll come into that shortly, but I'll just do my normal introduction. My name is Jared, or Peter, or Boniface. I answer to anything short of or you, and occasionally even that. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire, 7 miles south of the city of Oxford, in the south of England, in the UK, and I live with my two pussycats, Toby and Bunty, who I am sure will make an appearance at some point. And I started crocheting about 15 months ago, started knitting about 10 months ago, and have been involved with sewing and spinning and weaving in dibs and dabs in the time since then. I also work for a bus company. I'm a former bus driver, and before that was a Benedictine monk and used to teach, and I'm also a school governor of a primary school here in Abingdon. So that's basically who I am. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who are new viewers, welcome. I hope you enjoy spending some time with me. For those who are returning viewers, thank you for coming back to spend some time with me, and I hope I continue to give you some enjoyment while I talk about my craft life and other interesting matters, at least matters that interest me, I guess. So, straight in, here's Toby. He's just come up to say hello. Yes, you are, aren't you, Toby? As soon as I start recording, what's the first thing you do? That's right. Well, straight in then with a finished object. I didn't record my podcast yesterday, Saturday, which I normally would try and do. Given that I only recorded last week's on Monday, I guess, you know, I've left 6 days, and 6 days till next Saturday. But yesterday, I was feeling a little under the weather. I wasn't ill. I just felt a bit ugh, and slept in quite late until about 9:30. So I went round in the afternoon to my friend Wendy, who lives next door, in the block next door, that is. And we had a bit of a craft afternoon, which was very pleasant. She showed me some wonderful things that she's in process of making or has finished. I can't share any of them with you because they're gifts for other people anyway. But it makes me even more want to get Wendy in on my podcast at some point. She is very resistant to the idea, for all the understandable reasons, but as I don't think she has anything to worry about, but she wasn't happy. She wasn't happy, and she was going to bang mine and Bob's head together last week, but she got over her shock and surprise and was fine about it. So no great harm done by including her photograph in last week's podcast, against her knowledge, let alone her wishes. But I will keep the pressure on, and I hope one day maybe I will have a special guest star for you. But one of the things I wanted to do, and was helping Wendy do, she's making a similar one, but is the crocodile scales scarf that I was making. And because I wanted to have length, one ball of yarn was never going to be big enough. And so my intention was to use 2 balls of the yarn, cakes in fact they are, and that would have been fine. Bunty and Toby, stop fighting. Thank you. What can I say? I was going to use 2 different colourways rather, because they're self-banding, but they shared one of the strongest colours in there, so I thought that would be enough to unify them. But as I was making it, I sat there and thought, do you know what? I don't need to make this into a scarf. I can turn this into a cowl. And so I did. So this is my finished object. It's a crocodile scale cowl. It fits quite nicely over the top, and if you really want to, it does actually fit over twice, so it can make a really nice warm, sorry if that's affecting the microphone, but it will make a really warm covering, or just quite a nice fancy covering. It's built on a lattice work on the back, so it's not reversible, and the pattern was to alternate every 2 rows. So on one row you did 4 scales, and on the next you did 3, as you can see. So it went round. So I thought, well, I started here on the orange with 4, so I had to finish with 3, and then I simply single crocheted across using US terms. Sorry, cat hair. Wendy doesn't use American terms, so sorry, doesn't use UK terms, she only uses American terms, so I did this with her in American terms. So this would be a double crochet in English terms and a single crochet in American. And so because it was a lattice work, it was quite easy to just put a single crochet between the 2 posts around which the scales were built, and then put 3 single crochets in the 2 chain space between each of those sets of 2 posts, and it virtually disappears, as you can see. It's not at all clear that there is a join there, and I'm really quite pleased with it. So that's my finished object for the week. There isn't a pattern for this as such. The scarf was, I think, the Crochet Crowd, Mikey on the Crochet Crowd. So it really is just a minor adaptation of his pattern to make it into a cowl, and because I've made that one, I can now make another cowl for another friend using the other cake of yarn. So Wendy's, however, this is an Aran size weight of yarn. Wendy's using a DK weight, and she's using a beautiful stone-washed autumnal variegated yarn, and it really is, it looks so radically different from this, even though it's exactly the same. She's used two balls of yarn for hers, whereas I used a larger single ball for mine. But I'll hopefully be able to show you Wendy's when she's finished it. But we had a really good afternoon yesterday, sitting and chatting and crafting together. And I initially went round because they had a problem with their laptop, but it's actually seemed to sort itself out, so I've backed everything up now so that they won't have any future problems. Hello, Bunty. Have you come up to say hello now? You can just see the tail of Bunty, can't you? Sorry about that little interruption. Toby was being a bit silly. So I'm going to pour myself another tea. My tea today is again the gingerbread tea that was so generously gifted to me and is utterly delicious. I cannot tell you how fantastic this tea is. It's going to be a little hot, but I'll just have a bit of a sip. Excuse me. Oh, that is lovely. It really is refreshing as well, but I don't know how you get that buttery flavour into a liquid, but anyway, there we are, it's there. So that's it in terms of my finished objects. As I say, I had quite a busy week, even though I was off this week. I had quite a lot going on, and I'll talk about some of it later. So, I mean, it was quite nice that I had so much going on, but it did mean that I didn't actually have very much more time than I would normally have for crafting, as it turned out. But it was very nice not to have been at work and to have done all those things, because otherwise, had I been at work as well as done all those things, I'd have been probably quite worn out by the end of the week. So it was a nice change from going to work. But I'm back in tomorrow morning at 5:30. So I have a work in progress that I started yesterday, and I've been doing a little on this morning. And this is from a pattern from the Missouri Star Quilt Company, from Jenny Doan. And it is a Christmas table runner, and it is their Christmas tree using what they call the half hexagon template, which is a trapezium in English, a trapezoid in American or Canadian English. So a trapezium is 2 parallel lines and then 2 diagonal lines, but not parallel with each other. Not like that, but like that. So you've got a square top and a square bottom, and then 2 diagonal lines coming out like that. So almost like an extended triangle, if you like. So if that were the triangle, then you just extend it and you've got the parallel lines at top and bottom. So that's the trapezium. And of course, if you put two of those together, flip it over, then you end up with a hexagon. So I went with Wendy, we went to Hobbycraft, and I'll talk about what I bought in Hobbycraft, but I went specifically to see if I could find a trapezium half hexagon template, and they had one and it was tiny, so it was absolutely no use. But one of the nice things about going to see Wendy yesterday and talking about what it was that I was going to be doing but was having difficulty with my existing templates was this Christmas tree table runner that she had also seen at some point in the past. And she has a Brother scan and cut machine, so we were able to cut out in card a trapezium template to the right size, and I was able to then use that to cut out my pieces. And so I've cut out the pieces and I've stitched them together. I've not cut off any of my loose threads at the moment, so that's, excuse the rough edges, but I decided to use I've got bells and angels as my Christmas tree fabric, and then the backing fabric is a light green. So this is the Christmas tree bell fabric. I think you can see the bells in there, quite lovely. So there are 4 of those going up, and then this is my angels fabric. So again, there's 4, and as I come in closer, you can see the lovely angels in their lozenges. And the design requires another green panel to go across the middle, and then a star, which is this golden star, will be affixed between the two. I have a conundrum, not a conundrum, I'm just not sure which way to go yet. I have 3 suitable backing, so there'll be a border and then the backing fabric, which I think will be the same fabric for me. Oh, I should just say, by the way, that this is a very economical pattern to make. I made the 4 angel trapezium cutouts from 1 fat quarter, and the 4 bells from another fat quarter, which means that basically the background fabric was 2 more fat quarters size of fabric. I have a 3-inch strip that will go across the middle between these 2, so that they're lying end to end like that, with the star in the middle and the 3-inch strip between them. And then I don't think I'll do a wide border, it'll be quite a narrow border around the outside, maybe 1.5 inches, and then backing the whole thing. So it's not a huge amount of fabric needed, and I could use batting, but I don't think I will. I think I'll just leave it as a simple fabric, because I won't be using it as a heat plate as such. I have a cloth, a tablecloth that I'll put on the table, and this will go over the top of that. So it doesn't need to be heat resistant. So I think I'll just make it quite thin. But I'm in 3 minds. I'm in 3 minds as to which one of these fabrics to use as the backing. So I just want to give you the reminder, I've got this light green fabric. So one option is to go with a dark green as the outside and the backing. And that would be very, very natural looking, I guess. But to make it slightly more Christmassy, I also have this red fabric, and I like this red, but I think it sometimes is a little bit too red, too bright a red. So the 3rd option is to go with this darker red, which is a slightly more textured fabric as well. It's not as thick, it's a different type of material, but it's a really nice fabric. So my tendency is to go either for the darker green or for this, and I think my problem is the dark green isn't nearly dark enough compared to the light green, so I think this is going to be the one I choose, but I hope to have it done, well, by the end of today in fact. So I will be putting pictures of it on Instagram, but I'll also show it to you next week as a finished object, and we'll know which colour I decided to go with in the end. One word of caution: if you don't have the trapezium, the half hex template that Jenny uses, you must be careful about how you line up these edges, as you can see, they don't line up perfectly with each other. There is a little overhang at the top, and there is a corresponding overhang of the other fabric at the bottom. And so what you need to do is make sure that where that edge is lined up, and where these two fabrics intersect with the your 1/4 inch seam stitch is going through that point of intersection at both ends. And as long as you do that, then they will be horizontal. Otherwise, you'll have a whole host of problems getting them to fit. I know that from my own personal experience, because I didn't think about that until I did the first one, and then thought, what on earth has gone wrong? And so I had to rip them out and resew them, realised what it was, and resewed them. And I think that's an important thing to think about, really, that no matter how good a sewer you are, sorry, I've lost an item, there it is, no matter how good a sewer you are, no matter how accomplished on a sewing machine, your seam ripper is going to be an essential piece of equipment. And that should actually give quite a lot of reassurance to those of us who are not experts at sewing, and indeed at any other crafting. My great-aunt was a tailoress. She was very adamant on that point. She was not a seamstress, she was a tailoress. She was able to measure clothes to the person and cut the cloth accordingly and sew it and finish it to a high standard. She was properly apprenticed by her father in the 1920s to be a tailoress, and she was a very accomplished sewer, as you can imagine, and she used to make a lot of her own clothes and a lot of clothes for my mother and for us as children. My mother was also a very accomplished sewer. I showed you the stuffed toys that she made for the whole housing estate, in fact, one Christmas. Off there, Toby, thank you. And what they both shared in common was my great-aunt had a seam ripper, which when she died in 1977 went to my mother. And when I started sewing and doing such things, I gathered together all my mother's equipment that she no longer could use because of her Alzheimer's, and I have it. And it's this rather sweet, rinky-dinky, quite sparkly, which surprises me for my great-aunt. She never came across as that, although she did always like embellishments on clothes, and my mother used to have to tell her not so many bows and ribbons and the like on my sister's dresses and coats. That was always a point of contention between them. My great-aunt really enjoyed embellishments, and my mother much less so. Away, Toby, thank you. Go on. That's right. So this is my seam ripper, and this was my mother's before me and her aunt's before her. My mother was raised by her grandmother, so her aunt was in many ways a halfway house between an older sister and, in fact, her own mother. So she had a very good, strong relationship with her aunt, and that followed on with the rest of us as children. She was almost another grandmother to the rest of us. So this is all part of my hand-me-downs philosophy, if you like. What I really like about this seam ripper is knowing how wonderful a tailoress my great-aunt was, how accomplished a sewer my mother was. They both needed to have a seam ripper, and if they both needed to have one, then the fact that I sometimes need to use one is not a source of shame. It's just a sign that sometimes things don't quite go where we want them to go, and we need to take them out and do it again. And I think that should give us all encouragement with our crafting, that you don't always get it right every time. And most mistakes are fixable, and the ones that aren't fixable, in all honesty, the only people who probably notice them are us, the makers. So just a thought, just a little thought, because I had to use that today, or rather yesterday, to rip out some of those seams. So that's it in terms of what I'm doing at the moment. I have decided to try and really get to grips with finishing some of the long-standing items that I've been working on. So my intention this week is to focus on getting the pirate flag blanket finished. Yes, Wendy, I said the pirate flag. The skull and crossbones, which is about just over halfway done. So it's a corner-to-corner graph gan, and I want to get that finished so that the father of the little boy can give it to him for Christmas. So I will get that done this week, I hope, or at least get most of it done, if not completely finished. Toby, will you please get off it? Thank you. There's no show without punch, and that punch today happens to be Toby. Anyway, excuse me. So this week I have been out and about doing things. On Monday I did something, and I can't remember what now. That's right, on Monday I went to Mason's. I didn't need anything, I just wanted to pop in. I happened to be in town, so I popped in. And yes, I bought some wool. So, hands up, this was me. My arm wasn't twisted, it wasn't anybody else making me go with them. I decided to go to Mason's, and I bought two cakes rather, of the new cakes that I told you about, briefly described last week. These are the James Brett Fairy Cakes DK cakes. And I tried to explain it to you last week. You can see that there's a thread that runs through the middle, but they're quite feathered. So it gives this look almost of toweling, I guess. It's a very incredibly soft. It's 100% polyester. There's 200 grams, which means that there are 640 meters. I don't need my glasses on this one, Bob. Unfortunately, the color is FC3, whatever that means. There is a free pattern on the inside of the label, which allows you to make the blanket that is visible there. And I think that might even be a crochet pattern. I'll just take it off and have a quick look. Is it? That's measurements, tension. Is that? Oh no, it's a knitted blanket. Sorry, on the picture, for a moment it looks as though it's crocheted. But I dare say that there are good patterns for crocheting as well, which I will look at and make, I think. Oh, put the label on upside down, excuse me a second. Just put it back the right way around. I'm not the most organised of people sometimes. I am in many ways, but then I let things pile up and then have to have a mad flurry of sorting things out again. Anyway, so that's FC3, whatever that is, and this is FC5. So the Fairy Cake 3 and Fairy Cake 5. And you can see that this is a kind of bluey grey green affair. This is more of a chocolate, or pale chocolate in the middle, and then the cream, green and blue on the outside. So they look as though they make quite big bands, judging by the pattern of the blanket, which again I'll show you on that side. So it looks as though it makes fairly wide bands of colour, but it's got, as I say, it's got this lovely toweling feel. So I'll be quite interested to see how this actually works up. And I think I will try and crochet something with one of these, and I think possibly these will also be cushion covers rather than blankets. I found that, and this is something that I've learned as much from Wendy as anybody else, that cushions make a more practical gift in many cases to people than blankets do. Particularly in a world such as we now have, where many people, because it's not particularly cold in the UK except for short snaps, and most places have central heating now as well, people tend not to use blankets on their beds so much. They use duvets and thicker duvets, and I find that cushions and pillow covers are much more used by people. So I'm going to focus my energies less on making Afghans and more on making mini Afghans, if you like, and turning them into cushion covers. So that's probably what those two will turn into as well, rather in a similar way to the batik swirl that I was talking about last week. Toby, please stop messing about. I don't know what's got into you this morning. So that was Monday. Tuesday I went to IKEA in Reading and had an interesting mooch around. It's useful to get ideas for what is possible, I guess. I don't have any great plans at this moment in time, and that I always enjoy going through their homewares section because they have some interesting items. And I bought another couple of pillow forms for cushions. I don't know what's the matter with you, Toby. You seem to be in a funny mood. So I bought a couple of pillow forms and a beautiful scented candle of vanilla scent, and it really is a delicious scent. So I have nothing much to show from Tuesday, really. Could you leave the tripod? Toby, what is the matter with you? Come on. On here. Come and sit down here. Come on. If you want my attention, up here. Come on. Oh, so now you decide to walk away. Cats. Anyway, right. You're a funny so-and-so. Anyway, so there we are. I would just mention, by the way, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about the star. The star I cut out using... I drew two equilateral triangles overlapping each other. So you can see that there's a triangle here, and then if you flip it around, there's another triangle here. So I drew them on using my equilateral triangle template and then just overlapped them, and I used, to draw it, a Pilot friction pen. These are, I've got three. I've got red, black and blue pens, and these are very useful for drawing on fabric because once you get an iron hot and just rub it over, the writing disappears. So it's very useful for drawing on fabric, and then there's simply no trace at all of the design that I drew on there, which is rather nice. So I just thought I'd mention that as a useful tool. One thing that did arrive on Tuesday... Toby, please, will you stop messing about? One thing that did arrive on Tuesday, I just don't know what's got into him this morning. Anyway, one thing that did arrive on Tuesday was a book from Amazon. And this is The Spinner's Book of Fleece by Beth Smith. Yes, Beth Smith. And this is a really interesting book, really talking about how to go from the raw fleece off in the grease, as they call it, before it's been washed, scoured and carded, all the way through to spinning and how to apply yarns, but not just the how to do it, but how to choose what type of yarn in the first place based on fibre lengths and the particular qualities of the wool from the particular breed of sheep, and the qualities that different breeds of sheep share, so that you might not have access to one breed of sheep's fleece but may have access to another sheep's. Now, I'm not intending at this stage, there really isn't any storage anywhere, I'm not intending to buy fleeces to start washing and carding my own fleece into wool, but it's interesting to... I like, as I've mentioned before, I like reading instruction manuals. I like knowing every step that wool goes through, from growing on the animal to ending up in a blocked piece of fabric that somebody has made. And it's really nicely illustrated as well. But she takes it... I love Jacob sheep. These are very popular in North Wales, Jacob sheep. I can't see if you can see that. Yes, that's better. Very popular breed of sheep and wool in North Wales, particularly because you do get naturally occurring different colours on the same animal, as you can see. So it's a way of using different colours of wool without having to actually dye them, for example. Or that when you do dye them, you get different effects because of the different base colours. So it's an interesting book. It's not for everybody, but I'm really enjoying reading this. I'm about 3 chapters in so far, which is nice. So I can thoroughly recommend it. It's very well written, and I'm very much enjoying it. So We're done Tuesday. Wednesday, I have had a problem with my car. That was Wednesday, yes. The cable inside the door snapped, so I can't open the driver's door from the inside. I can open it from the outside, and of course, being a smart car, it's easy for me to scoot across to the passenger seat and get out of the passenger door, so it's not a major inconvenience, but it's something that I need to put right. And there is a car supply shop, Halfords, in Oxford, on west side of Oxford in Botley. So I was going out there, and next door to Halfords is a Hobbycraft. So I said to Wendy, would you like to come with me? And of course she said yes. So we popped over there, and I bought a few things. I didn't buy any wool, you'll be pleased to hear, which is unusual for me. But I did buy a few other bits and pieces. I bought another one of my Fat Quarter books, this one about Christmas this time. I had tried to get this. This is the third in the trio that I was trying to buy previously, but this was unavailable at the time. But it was there in Hobbycraft, so I've got it. And I mean, I have to say, some of them are, some of the decorations are very much Christmas decorations, but I think it's rather loosely a Christmas book. There are one or two embellishments that make it more about Christmas, but I think it's actually a more general Fat Quarter book. But I don't have any problem with that because it's quite useful to have different patterns. But it does give you, for example, I mean, a hearth cushion. I suppose it's used at winter time, and therefore, you know, it is technically Christmas is in winter, so you know it does work, but it's not particularly a Christmassy thing. But they do have patterns for stockings, two different types of stocking. That's the traditional, and this is more of a Scandi striped style. But there are lots of other things, napkin rings and mantle boxes and tea light holders and the like. Although I would be a little bit concerned about having a fabric tea light holder. I mean, I guess you put it, I'm presuming that you make the holder to go around something else that's actually holding the light, but I don't particularly think cloth and naked flames necessarily mix so well together, so I would be a little uneasy about that, but it's nice to have the complete set, as it were. I also bought, which I've not opened yet, a latch hook kit to make this lovely flamingo cushion cover. I've watched a few videos on latch hooking. I've never tried it, and there is a kit here with fairly rudimentary instructions, so I shall give it a go at some point, probably over Christmas, and I'll let you know how it goes. Wendy also bought herself one of these, she bought a different bird design on the front. They were on half-price special offer for £5, and I thought, well, why not? And if I like it, it may well be that there are other people who would enjoy doing that kind of thing that I could maybe make gifts to the sets. Now, I enjoy Christmas. I really do enjoy Christmas. And one of the big things that I noticed before I went into the monastery, for example, my Christmas decorations at home, at my parents' home, from, well, forever, all my life up until the age of nearly 22 when I joined the monastery, we never ever put Christmas decorations up before December the 24th. They always went up on Christmas Eve, and the crib would stay up until the end of the Christmas season, which isn't the 12th night of Christmas. It is either the Sunday following the Epiphany or the 2nd of February, liturgically. In the old calendar, it was the 2nd of February. In the new calendar, it's actually the Sunday following the Epiphany, or the Monday if the Sunday is the Epiphany. And in the monastery, it was exactly the same. We put the decorations up, we put the church crib up on Christmas Eve. And we did have Advent calendars, and we had Advent wreaths at school and in the church. and we did, as I say, we did all the Christmas decorations and all the rest of it. And I understand in America, because of the separation of church and state, that your public holidays, like Thanksgiving, are non-religious occasions. They're not based upon a religious feast. So that Jews and Muslims and Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and atheists could all celebrate Thanksgiving, because it's a state identity that underpins it rather than a religious identity or a religious idea. And I entirely accept that that's part of the foundational philosophy of the United States, that even though all of the founding fathers were theists or Christians, they didn't want to limit or impose a religious test on the population. And, there are understandable reasons why that was the case, even though in practice, even till the modern time, that separation of church and state probably hasn't been as robust as the founding fathers declared it. But whether they ever intended it to be as robust as perhaps something like the ACLU and the like tries to suggest. Anyway, I'm not getting involved in American internal constitutional law and politics, because that's not my concern. But in England, because England has always had a Christian element to its foundation, and I mean always, because the first English kings were the Wessex kings, who were Christians. And so England, as a single nation from the 9th century, always had a Christian identity underpinning it, and still does. We still have an established church. The monarch is the head of the governor of the head of the Church of England, even though she's not got any theological authority as such. It's more an administrative authority. She appoints bishops and the like, and they answer to her, but they don't. She isn't involved in the theological underpinnings of Anglicanism. Excuse me a second. So that the synod, the bishops and the clergy and the people agree on what their theology is. So I understand that in America, because Thanksgiving begins the holiday season, and hence Black Friday, when people go out to buy their Christmas presents, and the sales that are associated, which have now spread to the UK, more because retailers want to get people into a frenzy in order to spend money, I guess, and the sooner they can spend it, the better, as far as they're concerned. And I entirely understand. I'm not opposed to the commercialisation of Christmas, in the sense that it's always been, to a degree, for the last 200 years, a commercialised entity anyway, even if it's more overtly so now. But it does mean that people have started putting up their Christmas decorations now. I understand shops doing it. I really do. I understand Americans doing it, because Thanksgiving, as I say, is the beginning of the holiday season. But for me, next Saturday evening is the first Vespers of the first Sunday of Advent. And I am always a bit concerned, because Advent appears to be disappearing as a distinctive period of preparation for Christmas. And it is a penitential season, in the sense that it's an opportunity to prepare for the big feast. So you prepare yourself by self-denial, by works of charity to your fellow human beings, and by more focused prayer life. So the three pillars of Christianity of prayer, fasting, and good works, or almsgiving. Advent is a peculiar season, because it is both the culmination of the year, that the octave day of Christmas is in fact New Year's Day in the temporal sense, but it's also the beginning of the church's year, in that it is the period of looking to the coming of Christ in Bethlehem at the Nativity, but it also is the future culmination of the life of the world, in that we're also preparing for the coming of Christ at the end of time. And this Sunday, today, is Christ the Universal King. This is the final Sunday of ordinary time. It's the end of the church's year, and all of the rest of the week now is looking to the end times, and Christ will be ruler of all. And Advent, in a way, is showing that the second coming of Christ will be as unexpected and unpredictable as the first coming, that the Son of God is going to appear as the most lowly child, homeless, to a mother who is so young and wasn't technically married to her husband. They're not able to even get a room in the inn, that the first people that attend them after his birth are the lowest of the low, the shepherds from the hills, and that then these, for a particularly Jewish Messiah, that the first people to recognize him as king are the three wise men, alien, Gentile philosophers, pagans, heathens, whatever you want to call them in Jewish terms, are the people who recognize the birth of the new king. So it's an unexpected story, and that's really giving us a hint that the future coming of Christ will be equally unexpected, though not necessarily in the identical way, because in some ways, we'd be kind of, fool me once, but fool me twice kind of thing. And I just worry that we lose the proper sense of the year. By celebrating Christmas in Advent, we don't actually celebrate Christmas in Christmas. And so we miss out Advent completely. December gets overrun by Christmas, and then January becomes this rather tired and desolate time of year. Whereas in fact Christmas should be celebrated in January, because we've actually prepared for the festivities by the works of preparation that we carry out in Advent. And we don't have this problem with Easter. People give up things for Lent. They understand that Lent is a penitential period leading up to the beginning of the great spring rebirth of the world. And if you actually look at the church's calendar in that way, what you have in December and January is Advent and Christmas, which then immediately leads into February and March being Lent, and then Easter into April. And then at the end of May, you have the summer, the ordinary time of the year, the nice time of the year, when you don't need the mysteries to support you through the rather dour and often difficult times of year, when there is less food available, when it's cold, when it's dark, when it's wet, when you rightly feel miserable because of the world around you is feeling rather dank and grey. So that's just a personal thing. I have conceded a great deal of ground, if you like, over the Christmas thing. I decorate my office in the weeks leading up to Christmas because it's nice for people to have that celebration. It's what they're expecting. So I guess I don't have a problem with Christmas. I love Christmas, but I really love Advent as well. I love Advent carols. I love writing Christmas cards. I love wrapping presents. I love all of the wondrous expectation of small children about getting excited. But maybe I worry unduly, but I do sometimes worry that we sometimes lose the depth of the seasons by foreshortening and only celebrating the anticipation rather than the actuality of something. Anyway, I'll leave that as a thought for you. It's just something. Now, within all this, I only send religious Christmas cards. I don't make any bones about it. I don't have any problem with receiving any type of Christmas card, but my Christmas cards are always Christmas cards with a religious image on the front. Usually a nativity scene or some aspect of the nativity scene. Just an interesting side point. I get lots of Christmas cards from colleagues and friends at work. The only religious Christmas card I ever get from colleagues at work is from a Muslim colleague. The only one. Everybody else sends the robins and the Christmas trees and the church choirs, the carol singers and all that kind of thing, or presents, or Father Christmas, or Rudolph, and they're all fun. So, you know, they're all bright and jolly and cheerful. So I don't have any problem with non-religious Christmas cards. But it's just an interesting observation that the only person who ever sends me a religious Christmas card at work is a Muslim. I'll just leave that as a thought hanging in the air for you again. And it's been some years since I've had a proper crib at home. I used to have one, and when I moved it got broken, so it's never... And I've got little ornaments, which... I do have a lovely crib made from wood from Bethlehem, but it's a tiny little ornament, almost a tree ornament, in fact. And that has been my crib. But this year I was in Hobbycraft, and that was part of where we were going with all that conversation. I was in Hobbycraft, and I saw behind the till a wooden frame, and in it little felt nativity scene figures. And so I bought the two. Then they weren't sewed together. One is a wooden frame, this wooden frame, which hangs on the wall. I'm not turning it round yet for a reason. But it's just a plain wooden frame. It's very nicely made, but it is just a plain wooden frame. And I thought, well, that's going to be a bit dull. So I said to Wendy, what I'll do is I'll paint different colours in the shapes on the back wall. So it just gives it a bit more of a pop. And she said, well, why don't you cut out felt and do that instead, because it would be much quicker and simpler. And she was absolutely right, so I did. So this is my nativity frame, nicely done. This is the first time Wendy's seen it as well. I think I've got a picture of it before I did all this, and if I have, I'll pop it in here. But I have done different levels in different colours, and obviously this one cuts across 2 levels, so it's a different colour entirely. But I'm rather pleased with that. And to enable me to do that, I already had a big bag of different coloured felts, and I just cut them to the right size. But I had bought at Hobbycraft my first glue gun, so there we are. It took me a little bit of getting used to, so the first time I put the glue into the thing, I hadn't actually got the shape ready, and the glue went hard before I actually put the shape in, so I had to scrape the glue off and reapply. But it did work, and I bought a nice big pack of extra glue pellets as sticks, as it were. So it's only a little glue gun, but it's perfect for getting into those small corners. So that was that, and this is the set that I bought. So I hope you can see those. Yes, you can. So there are these little figures. There are 2 shepherds, 3 kings, Joseph, Mary holding the baby, and an angel. So the angel will go on the top. So my intention is angel in here, Mary and Joseph and Jesus in here, 2 of the 3 kings there, 1 of them here, and the 2 shepherds here. So that will hang on the wall. And it needs to hang on the wall because I have 2 cats that do like to get their noses into everything. So those are going to be the figures. And I've opened the box, but I've not actually started yet. But so it comes in these little sets, and all the little pieces cut out, ready to go. So I just need to do some blanket stitching around the outsides. As you can see, that basically that's what they've done. It's just blanket stitching around the outsides, and then you glue on the bits and pieces, which I've got my glue gun, so that will work. And there's a bag of plastic pellets and a bag of polyfill, so they'll be weighted down and won't simply blow away or topple over at the breath of any air as it goes past. So I'll be doing those over the next couple of weeks. Just when I have a few minutes, I'll just stitch together another one, and eventually I'll have them all done, and then that will go up. Well, in fact, I'm hoping to have it done this week, because I'd like it to start going up for the beginning of Advent, which is next Saturday evening, as I say. That, I think, is all of my acquisitions, and all the little bits and pieces that I have started. There was one work in progress which I didn't mention. I had, and it's almost done in fact, but I tried my first bit of Fair Isle, the little bauble that I mentioned. I've learned a few bits and pieces, and I just need to finish off now reducing it back down to the small amount, and then it gets seamed up the side, filled, and a little chain made for the top to hang it from. So I didn't really think this was a significant work as such, but it was an interesting experiment in Fair Isle. As you can see, lots of floats on the back, and I've learned quite a bit about tensioning and how to knit with 2 yarns in my hand and all that kind of thing. So it's been quite a useful little experiment. I just, as I say, pick that up as and when I feel like it. Well, hello again everybody. This is a little bit of an insert into my video because I finished recording about 3 hours ago now and realised that I had forgotten to show a couple of things, and also had not given the full breakdown of the week that I was going to talk about. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. So it's an insert into the pre-existing video, but I hope you'll enjoy it anyway. I had a very nice lunch in between as well, which was a rather nice piece of rump steak and some mushrooms, and mashed potato, very tasty, and a very nice bottle of red wine, Perez Cruz, which is a oh, where is it? Can't see what the actual grape is. It's in gold. I can read it, but it's the light bouncing off it makes it more difficult to see what it is. Oh, it's Cabernet Sauvignon Syrah. It's very, very good. So excuse me if you see me having a drink. Excuse me. So I bought, while I was in Hobbycraft on Wednesday with Wendy, the other thing I did buy was some fat quarters. In particular, they had Christmas fat quarters out, and I just wanted to show you those. So I'm just going to open the wrapper, and here we are. So there is this, the cutest. I mean, that is just adorable. Whatever I do with that is just adorable. I have a feeling that these fat quarters may well turn into Christmas tree runners for friends, but they are just wonderful. And then there is this lovely Scandi style reindeer with stars and hearts and Christmas trees, which is again a very pretty fabric. This lovely red snowstorm, if you like, and there is an equivalent black to that, and then a red version of the reindeer with the Christmas trees and the stars. So that was one fat quarter bundle, and then the second fat quarter bundle that was Christmas based was this one. And these are all in Hobbycraft, and they're not too expensive, £7 for the 5 different fabrics. This one is much more childlike. Merry Christmas. Snow globes, effectively, with Father Christmas and snowmen in them. Actually, snowmen dressed up as Father Christmas. No, there is a Father Christmas in there. There he is. And reindeer and the like. So that's a very attractive. I mean, they're all very attractive. I keep saying this is very attractive. It's funny. You quickly run out of words to describe things. Once you've described one thing that's very pretty, everything else is kind of very pretty as well. A couple of them are background fabrics. There's this one which is similar but different enough that these are all in circular lozenges. And I think this one particularly would lend itself. I think both of the snow globe and this one would lend themselves to being Christmas trees. And then there are these rather attractive backgrounds. I love the candy striping on there, and who doesn't love a good polka dot? And if you look very closely, there are actually 2 different types of polka dot in there. And then this lovely Christmas tree background. So that would be quite peculiar, wouldn't it, to have a Christmas tree background to a Christmas tree, for example. And I've used the same background on my first Christmas tree runner. but there isn't actually any reason why you couldn't use a different background on one side and a different background on the other. You'd then have to make a decision about that central panel, but again, it's not beyond the wit of man to imagine doing it slightly differently. And then finally, this third Christmas bundle. This is Christmas tree baubles and decorations. That looks like, I guess that's meant to be a reindeer. It's a rather stylized reindeer with bells and trees and holly and snowflakes and a turtle dove. It's a bird of some kind anyway, maybe a pheasant, who knows. Another Christmas tree background. I really, really like that one. I don't know what it is, but there's something about this one that just feels, I think probably it just feels slightly more grown up than the other one. And the other one is very nice, I'll just get it out. But this one just feels a little bit more sophisticated, perhaps. And then there's a blue version of the reindeer. And finally, a different kind of Christmas tree background, which again is a very pretty thing, and there appears to be some mistletoe in there as well, if I'm not much mistaken. Yes. So there's interspersed between the Christmas trees are branches of mistletoe. So those are the Christmas fat quarters. I just thought I would show you. I've moved on a little with my sewing as well. I've now put them all together. I haven't done the back, the edging of the background, but I think you can see the star is there, and obviously you won't be able to see through it once it's got the backing on there as well. But it's they're rather. I really do like the way it looks, and it fits my table perfectly. I have a drop leaf table, and I have it against the wall, so I normally would only open one leaf, but if I'm having a large group of people around, then I can open both leaves. And this will fit over the central part of the table and the drop-down leaf at the front. So it will be a Christmas decoration hanging down rather like that during the day, and then when the table is open, this will all be laid out as the centre of the table, so that will be all quite attractive whichever way round it is. So that's where we are with that. I've not made the back for that. And when we were at IKEA on Tuesday, Wendy and I and Bob also went to Downz in Reading, because it's next door, and you know, once you're there, why not? It's not quite next door, but it's in the same area. Sorry, I've got lots of bits and pieces of threads all over me. And I saw this lovely owl fabric. Again, these are all fat quarters and they cost about the same amount. And these lovely leaves, all the same design but different colours. And I really, the yellow is a very mustard yellow. So it's a yellow I much prefer to bright sunny yellow, mostly. And then, so yes, there were two fat quarters of the owls, top and bottom. And then finally, a much more traditional kind of fabric, really, but I really liked the colours in these. Oh, there's 6 pieces in these. Yes, there's only 5 in the others. Right, so it's these rather pretty roses. And these will make lovely bags, I think, for female friends. So these would be the outer fabrics, that and this pink, and a similar one of the roses on, which is brown. And then there are these contrast background fabrics that would go quite nicely with them. So those were my other acquisition that I didn't talk about. The other thing I didn't talk about was on Thursday, I spent the day at my primary school. We had what's known as a data day. Every school in the UK, every state school that is, has 4 specific periods of testing children. One of them is done more informally, which is the early year foundation stage. So that would be nursery reception in the infants. and indeed we now have 2-year-olds as well as 3-year-olds, so it will be 2, 3, 4, 5, more or less. And then at the end of year 2, we have Key Stage 1, and then at the end of year 6, we have Key Stage 2, and then in the secondary school, there is Key Stage 3. And these are these SAT tests. And as a result of doing these tests, we're then able to compare our performance as a school to those of schools in the same area, under the same local education authority, but also nationally. And it's very important when studying data to always take into account, first of all, that these are real human beings that you're learning about. So they're not just figures on a piece of paper, there's a real story underpinning these figures. But the other thing to bear in mind with statistics is the size of the random sample that you use significantly affects the reliability of the figures. And we're quite a small primary school. We have 60 children per cohort, so 60 children in each school year effectively. Which means that 1 or 2 children can have quite a significant impact on the overall figures, particularly when you start taking into account children with special educational needs, pupils who have absent parents, because one of our particular challenges at Dunmore is that we have a lot of services children, and some of those service personnel are sent into war zones. So not only are they absent parents, but that there could be emotional fallout because the child knows their parent to be in a place where they could be killed. Not to put too fine a point on it. So there are particular challenges in educating young children, well, children of any age, from those kinds of family backgrounds. And there are other social and economic factors which govern the particular concern over a child's progress that we have. And progress is an important word. It is easy to imagine that schools measure their success or failure by the levels of attainment of their pupils. And there is a degree of truth in that. But it's very important to remember that education is not about you either achieved this level or you failed. It's more about where did you start from and where have you ended up. So the point would be that in a year of 60 children, where maybe 5 of the children have special educational needs, another 5 are from forces families, another 5 would have particular challenges related to English as an additional language rather than as the first language, and then another half dozen who may come from deprived backgrounds, and maybe children who have been fostered or adopted, and they have particular emotional and psychological needs as well, which can affect their overall level of attainment. So at the same time, you could have 2 or 3 children in one year group who are just phenomenally outstanding at, say, mathematics, which will skew your attainment. So the measure of attainment is not a very sound measure for the quality of the school. It is a sound measure for the quality of the ability of the child, but is not a good measure for the progress that child has made, because for that you have to measure where they started from, then measure where they've ended up and see what progress they have made in between. And so we do look at attainment because it is important that the children achieve what they could achieve or what they should be expected to achieve for children of their age and at that stage of their development. And so attainment is important. But more important is progress. It's the value added, if you like. It's what the school gives to the child. It's what the child receives from all the other children and from the staff within the school that enables them to flourish and for their development to be to at least not be negatively affected, and more positively to be further improved than perhaps would be expected. So generally speaking, whatever the child achieves at
the early years foundation, and particularly at Key Stage 1, there is a certain amount of progress that that child is expected to have made by the time it gets to Key Stage 2. So whatever level of attainment they have at Key Stage 1, normally you would expect them to make 2 further steps of attainment, and that would be the measure of their progress. And anybody achieving less than 2 steps forward, we are considered to have failed them. And anybody who has made more than 2 steps forward, then we're considered to have significantly helped them. Last year, so last year's data day, that is, so the figures from the year before, because our figures are always 6 months out of date, as it were, because the testing happens in the summer of the year previously, so we get the figures at the end of that year. So last year, in 2016, on our data day, so this would be the school leavers of 2016 rather than school leavers of 2017, we had seen quite a significant drop in the progress of our mathematics students. The level of attainment wasn't far below that of the national average, but we had had a group who should have been able to achieve more than just attaining the average. And so we as a group of governors, we worked with the senior leadership team in the school, and we identified where we needed to invest more time and more resources into the teaching of mathematics, and I can report that that had a significantly positive effect, that the school has rebounded quite hard. We have really pushed on with mathematics. However, we've now, with these figures, discovered that we have a particular problem with writing. Now, part of the problem that we have is going to sound slightly odd, but bear with me. Part of the problem we have is that the national average of girls in the UK is 49%. So there are 51% of the school will be male and 49% female. And that includes any gender fluidity. So a child that identifies as female but may be biologically male can be listed under the female side. But the proportion remains more or less 50-50, but it's 51-49 with a rounding error. And that's broadly in line with the expectations of the rates of births of males to females, and you know, you'd guess it to be more or less 50-50. Now, for a number of reasons, we have a boy-heavy cohort. We are in the 60s to nearly 70% boy, which means that we only have 40 to 35% of our pupils are female. A number of the reasons for this are related to the fact that we have had male nursery workers, and parents often feel that boys in particular will react well to a strong male role model. So that's been quite an attraction to a lot of parents to send their boys to Dunmore. And our current leadership team is our head teacher and deputy head teacher both happen to be male, and the previous head and deputy both happen to be male, although our other senior leaders are all female. And we have many more female teachers in the school than male. But it's just happened as a historical accident for the last few years that our leadership team and our nursery team have been led by men. And this has meant that it's more attractive for parents to send boys to the school. And one of the issues with boys is that neatness and attention to detail do not rank highly for them. It is a known phenomenon that where there is a slight advantage in the number of girls in a classroom, then the boys will actually, as long as it's not an overwhelming majority, so if it were, say, 60% female and 40% male, then the 40% of males would be expected to adopt a more concentrated approach similar to the females, whereas if it goes above 60%, then the boys start to lose interest because they feel left out, as it were. Curiously, girls don't seem to suffer the same effects with the number of boys, but where there are larger numbers of boys, classrooms tend to be more disturbed because boys tend to be more boisterous. I mean, I'm talking in very, very general stereotypes here. It's just once you start losing individuals and start seeing groups, you do start to see these tendencies occurring. And so we have now had to look again at our provisions. We want to maintain the progress that we've made in mathematics, and we've had a lot of success in embedding the approach with the teaching staff. They have seen the results. They have seen the positive outcomes for them in the classroom and for their children in terms of their attainment, and also in terms of just feeling that they understand what's being communicated in the classroom. And so we're hoping now to use a similar raft of measures to address our writing issues. And so it was a quite concentrated period of 4 hours of studying data and a lot of interesting back and forth between education professionals, but also with the four governors who were there, three governors who were there, sorry. Yes, no, four governors, we were four governors, yes. All of whom have been involved as governors for at least 3 years, but some for a lot longer than that, and we all come from different professional walks of life, but we're able to apply some of that to the situations that the school is facing. And it was very heartening to see the interaction of ideas and the ability to embrace the change that needs to be made in order to improve the outcomes for the children. And that child-centered that focus on helping the child to achieve more was very heartwarming to see from everybody who was involved, from the professionals and from the governors, some of whom are parents and two of whom, like me, one other like me, who isn't a parent, although he has previously had children. They've grown up and are professional people themselves now. So I just thought I'd share that with you, just to give you some insight. Tomorrow, immediately after work, I have to go to the school because I have a head teacher appraisal taking place, where three governors sit with the school advisor and the head teacher to go through his performance in the last year and to highlight those areas that we believe should be developed further, and perhaps to deal with any challenges that inevitably arise because a head teacher is one person and you can't expect one head teacher to be brilliant at absolutely everything that they do. But you need to ensure that where there are gaps in the head teacher's capabilities, that either we take up the slack as a governing body or that the senior leadership team has the complementary skill sets that enable the school to be led more effectively going forward. So I'll be at school for about 3-4 hours again tomorrow after work doing that. So I just thought I'd share with you some of those insights of being a school governor and what it is that we actually do in terms of helping the school with its strategic development. So I'll return you now back to the recommendations, which is the final part of the main part of the video. So until next week, I won't say goodbye now because I'll be saying goodbye shortly, so I'll just finish it here. So I just have one recommendation this week, but before that, I just thought I'd mention The Walking Dead. This week's episode, so that was last Sunday's episode, for those in America, and Mondays for those of us in the UK, was a very good step forward in the development, understanding the characters, particularly of Negan, but also the Saviours. The Saviours have been rather cartoon bad guys, cutouts, as it were. It's been rather two-dimensional up to this point, but it was really interesting having the dynamic of the leadership of the Saviours and the particular issue that they faced. I'm not going to say more because I know some people are watching it and haven't yet caught up to the current series, but this episode was a really good character-driven episode, much less of the shoot-'em-up kind of behaviour, but it also showed a certain development in the Rick dynamic with his close allies. I'm not going to give names because I don't want to tell people who survives season 6 and 7 because I know people are still watching. So it's a really powerful, I mean, I think everyone can guess that Rick as the main character is going to survive, so I don't think I'm giving anything away there. But it's a really powerful character-driven episode, and it's much, for me, much preferable to a lot of what has preceded. So that's a positive thing. But what I wanted to talk about was one of the things about Christmas, two things about Christmas really. Like my mother, it doesn't really begin to feel like Christmas until I have read or watched A Christmas Carol. I like the cartoon versions, the Muppet Christmas Carol and that kind of thing. I have to be honest, the Disney Christmas Carol starring Jim Carrey was a couple of 4 or 5 years ago now, I guess, is fantastic. It is such a powerful adaptation of the books. It's not perfect adaptation, because no adaptation is ever going to be perfect. It never will be a complete reflection of the content of the book, or novella really. But it is a really, really, really powerful performance. And the whole, it's a cartoon, but it's so powerful in its execution that you forget it's a cartoon. It feels real. And I will talk more about The Christmas Carol in a later podcast, because I will be reading The Christmas Carol, A Christmas Carol, next after I finished Northanger Abbey. So for those of you who have subscribed to my other channel, which I'll put a link in down below for those of you who were not aware of it or hadn't seen the promotional trailer. I've just finished recording chapter 15 of Northanger Abbey. There are 30 chapters in all in Northanger Abbey, although they are of variable lengths. But that basically means I'm about halfway through the book, so it'll take about another week for the whole book to be finished. So that's I think it's 8 episodes. Takes me up to the end of the 15th chapter. So A Christmas Carol I will start probably at the beginning of the first week of Advent, next weekend, or Monday or Tuesday next one from now. And that'll be an opportunity as well, I think, to talk about it on here. So my main recommendation this week is the other Christmas activity is Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite, the ballet. It's a long-standing Christmas tradition in many countries, in fact, for the Nutcracker to be staged by the major ballet companies. Excuse me a second. And there is a very good version online, which is staged by Matthew Bourne. And that made me realise that there was also my actual recommendation this week, which I will put a link in below here, is Matthew Bourne's version of Swan Lake. Now, this is about 20 years old as a production, although it has developed in that time. And the link I'm going to put in here is a fairly recent version of his version of Swan Lake. And his version of Swan Lake is probably most famous for having male swans instead of female swans. He does significantly alter the story in order to reflect this change. And clearly for those who may have an issue with homosexual attraction, then I would not watch this, because it's an enlightening story in many respects, because rather like the Black Swan, Odile was often played by the same prima ballerina as Odette, the White Swan, who was the princess that Siegfried was supposed to marry. In the Matthew Bourne's version, the prince, who is never named, his mother, the Queen, clearly has real difficulty expressing emotion and intimacy with her son. And the boy dreams of this swan, and then at the climax of, I think, Act 3, he dances a pas de deux with the White Swan. And it's a very powerful and very sensual dance. All the more remarkable because it's two men. Normally a pas de deux would be between a man and a woman. Well, the ballet dancer rather, who dances the White Swan, in Act 4 becomes the stranger. So we're at the palace ballroom. And in this version, the palace is decorated in a very neo-fascistic style. The torches on the wall are held in a clenched fist, for example. So it's quite strong, powerful, masculine lines, very aggressive lines in the whole decoration, which is... The ball very quickly descends from a rather formal, stiff affair into quite a debauched affair when the stranger arrives. The stranger is all dressed in black leather, and it is the same dancer as played the White Swan. And eventually the Queen submits to the stranger, and they have a liaison. And in order to cope with this, the prince fantasizes another pas de deux with the stranger. So this is a direct juxtaposition against the rather sensual, loving, affectionate pas de deux with the White Swan. It's the same dancers involved, but this is a very violent, sexual dance. And it highlights, it's not so much about the homosexuality of the piece, it's more about the difference between love and intimacy on the one hand against just sexual activity on the other, which can be quite violent and disjointed and disconnected and emotionally vacant. And I won't spoil the whole story for you. It's well worth watching. The music, of course, being Tchaikovsky, is fantastic, but it's a very, very powerful performance of an alternative rendering of the story of Swan Lake. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's got very high production standards, and I just thoroughly recommend it for you. So I think that's probably it for today. I will crack on with my bits and pieces and get this table runner finished, and I'll let you know. Oh, there is one other thing. The elephant in the room. November ends on Thursday the 30th. So on Friday the 1st of December, I have to decide what to do with my lovely mutton chops. So I have three options. The first is to continue growing the mutton chops. The second is to shave everything off and get rid of it. The third is to grow out the shaved parts and have my full moustache and beard, which is what I would normally have at this time of year. I'm going to leave it down to you to decide. Now, I know on YouTube that it's possible to have a poll set up. I need to see whether I can get it set up to have three options. If I can't, then I'll ask you to leave a comment down below. But I will put into the description box whether there is a poll for you to choose which one, or whether you should leave a comment if you want to have your say. It's a bit of fun. I promised to bind myself to the decision of the majority. So if you want to have a say, you'll need to let me know before 5:30 GMT AM on Friday the 1st of December, because that's the point at which I have to decide whether to shave or not to shave. That is the question. So a little bit of fun for you. So we'll see which way the wind blows on that particular one. So thank you very much for spending some time with me today, and I hope you have a very crafty week, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. So for now, bye bye.